Let's go ahead and we can start our slides and get going. Welcome, everybody. We are thrilled to have you here today for the PK3 Math Standard webinar. My name is Renee Marshall, and I'm coming to you from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. I see many familiar faces here today. We appreciate you taking your Thursday morning and being with us. We have some really important webinars today and tomorrow, and we're recording everything just so everyone knows. So if for some reason you're not able to be live at one of the webinars, we will get things up and posting as soon as possible. So thank you so much for being here today. Let's go ahead and go to our second slide. We're going to ask everybody to introduce yourself in the chat, please. Please include your name, your title, your affiliation. We are so excited to be here, and we want to know exactly who's with us. And so we see a lot of familiar faces, but if we could also have everybody introduce in the chat, that would be perfect. We have a wonderful team here today from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and I'm so thrilled. You see a lot of us on screen, hopefully right now. My name again is Renee Marshall, and I'm a proud administrator of early childhood education and our PK3 credential and everything involved in it. So I'm thrilled to be here today. We have Erin Sullivan, who is also an administrator here at the Commission, Cheryl Hickey, who is also an administrator here at the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. We've got Tim Weeks, who is a consultant, Rosemary Wren, who is a consultant, and Debbie Keeler, who is here today as well. So we have just a dream team of fantastic people who've got their heads and their hearts in the right places for this work. And so we're all thrilled to be here today. We also have some resources that we want to share, and we'll be sharing these repeatedly over the course of the webinar. So don't worry, like if you're seeing this right now and trying to take a screenshot, there's no need to do that. We will make sure that the slides are posted on the PK3 ECE website, and we have that listed here. We're also going to be putting all of these different links in the chat for you. So that way you'll be able to access them live. And we have done the resources in two different ways. We have, specifically put the URLs here because we wanted to make sure people didn't have issues trying to link. And so we will get those in the chat. We will also make sure that this is posted on the CTC website. We want to share some exciting things too that are coming up in terms of resources. First off, remind everybody that we have office hours. We're here the first and third Tuesdays of the month for any questions or conversations you want to have. We also have upcoming webinars. Later today, we have the equity webinar, and tomorrow we have the program webinar for everybody who's getting ready to submit programs and create programs and want to have those conversations of what that will entail. And we also want to alert everybody to on Monday, February 6th, we are very excited to host the very first ECE Community Circle. And the idea is to create a space where everybody can hang out and talk. If there's any concerns or issues, we want them to raise up so that way we can make sure that we are working on this effort collectively across the state. So we invite you to come to the ECE Community Circle. It's our first one on Monday. We thought it'd be perfect right after the webinars to be able to come together and to talk and to chat. Let's go to the next slide. We also have a question form. So anybody who's interested in submitting a question, please do so via the form. What we are going to do is we are going to be taking these questions. We've already created FAQ that is on the PK3 website, and we will continue to add to that FAQ. Another thing that's great about the question form is it allows us, there are times when questions are submitted that are not truly the purview of the commission, but more the purview of the California Department of Education. And so we're working directly with our colleagues at CDE and making sure that any questions that you have that are for them go directly to them, and then they're adding to their FAQ. So we're really trying hard to have clear, consistent communication. If you have any other ideas on ways that we can enhance communication, please let us know. Let's go to the next slide, please. I want to let everybody know what to expect for today. So we wanted to start off a little bit about some resources that are available. We will circle back to that later on today. We have an exciting speaker when it comes to math and early childhood education and young children. Our 3 to 3, 3-year-olds up until 3rd grade, our 8-year-olds. And that is Dr. Deborah Stipek, who is coming to us from Stanford and will be speaking with us for a bit today. After that, we are going to have the PK3 math program standards. We're going to get into candidate competencies and TPEs, submitting a new program proposal, and then we will wrap up. We are anticipating this is going to be a jam-packed hour. Thank you for being with us and staying with us. And we should be wrapping right at the hour. Let's go to the next slide. Now, with that, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Deborah Stipek. I've had the opportunity to work with Deborah in a variety of contexts, and she is just a champion of education, a champion of the education of young children, and just one of the best colleagues that we get the opportunity to work with. So with that, I will hand it over to Deborah. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Renee. I'm delighted because I've been fantasizing, dreaming about this P3 credential for so many years now, and really glad that it's come to fruition. So I am just going to quickly tell you a little bit about where the standards, the program standards, came from in math. So if you go to the next slide, first, I think many of you know that math has not received a lot of attention, at least compared to literacy. And we see less math instruction, particularly in preschool, but even in the early grades, it tends to get a lot less time than literacy, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think sometimes too little time. And I want to add that I think one of the things that is important to keep in mind is that a lot of the people who go into the early childhood education field are not necessarily the most confident people in math. There's a lot of math anxiety. And so one of the things we need to be aware of when we're supporting teachers to be teachers of children in math is to develop their own sense of confidence and competence in teaching. Math is important, and I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why. I'm assuming, if you want to go to the next slide, that most of you are here because you already care about math, but so I'm probably preaching to the choir, but just a couple of reasons why math is really worth paying attention to. One, this slide is from a colleague of mine who did a study a long time ago, but the data pretty much reflect the national data on the difference between children's skills when they enter kindergarten coming from low-income, marginalized families versus middle-class or more affluent families. There is as much as a year, sometimes more than a year lag, and it's an opportunity gap. And I think what we really care about is equity and making sure that all children have an equal opportunity to develop their foundational math skills. The other thing that's important to keep in mind, next slide, is that children's math skills, when they enter kindergarten, are highly predictive of their later math achievement. So the yellow line that you're looking at are the children who entered kindergarten in the top quartile on a math assessment. The blue or black line, I'm not sure which, those are the children who entered in the bottom quartile, and the pink line are the 50% in the middle. And what you see is a fair amount of stability. So where you enter is often, not necessarily, but often pretty much where you end up as many as 8 years later or in 8th grade. So it matters what kids' skills are when they enter. And we're really in preschool in those early years, we're building the foundation for children to develop their math skills as they go through elementary school and beyond. Next slide. So how did the math standards come about? CTC recognized that they had in their standards a great deal of attention to language literacy, which is a good thing, but they decided they needed to also attend to math specifically. So they formed a work group of people who have been working in early math. Megan Frank at UCLA, who's their multiple subject credential person and has been working for the last decade or so on preschool math. Linda Plattis at San Francisco State, myself, and then Renee, who made sure that the community college perspective was represented. As we were working on the standards, we realized we wanted to coordinate with the P3 teacher performance expectations in math so that the teacher professional development programs were making sure that people were prepared to get their kids up to those who were able to meet those teacher performance expectations. Then we realized that there really weren't very many performance expectations that were specific to math. So we took that on and we did them simultaneously to make sure that they were aligned to each other. Next slide. We consulted a lot of different standards and other materials to make sure that there's consistency and alignment across CTC and the Department of Education documents. So we looked at what children are expected to know in the preschool foundations, and which, by the way, are being revised, and the Common Core math standards. And we ensured that all strands of math were reflected in this document. We also looked at research on effective math instruction, which we've come a long ways in the last decade or two. And so we wanted to make sure that the new standards reflected what we know now about how children learn math, with an emphasis on building their conceptual understanding, developing strong foundations for later math, listening to and building on children's understanding, which means to some degree differentiated instruction, problem solving using a range of tools and strategies, connecting math to everyday life, building positive relationships with children, because that's critical for any learning, whether it's math or literacy or science or whatever. Now, there's a lot more that went into our considerations, but those are some highlights that you'll see represented in the standards. And that's my contribution to this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Stipek, for just giving us a wonderful background on the math program standards and TPEs. We appreciate so much your efforts and your work and contribution to the field of early childhood education. So in building on that, we look at what those core documents are, as Deborah mentioned. And when we look at the learning foundations and the content standards, we want to be sure that we become familiar with all of these resources and how they align with the math program standard. And the next slide that we get to, I'll finish this slide out. We'll look at, it provides a visual example of how these resources do align. We also want to use the current preschool learning foundations and the preschool frameworks and K-3 content standards and frameworks in a cohesive, seamless way, and making sure that we are looking at the mapping of these standards and how they relate to one another and build upon each other. And then embed the math program standards and TPEs in specific coursework and supervised field experiences that are developed for this credential that highlight these documents. So the main message is that we really emphasize that you spend a lot of time diving into these documents, becoming familiar with them, use them in a cohesive, seamless manner, because the span does start with PK, TK with the learning foundations and then move into the K-3 content standards. Next slide, please. So this particular slide gives you a little bit of a visual example of how the learning foundations and the content standards do align specifically for mathematics. And Dr. Stipek did refer to the fact that the learning foundations are under revision. And one of the considerations in that revision is they're looking at how do the learning foundations specifically align in each of the domain areas, including mathematics. So we're going to see an enhancement of that alignment as we move towards a final revision of the learning foundations. But for now, we are using the current learning foundation standards for PK, TK, and the K-3 content standards. So you'll see in each one of these categories, mathematical reasoning for the learning foundations, but in K through third grade, that's considered mathematical practices. That's one of the areas that I think in looking at a revision, they're looking at how that can more closely align. And then in the other area for learning foundations, it's number sense at that basic conceptual area for young children. As it moves into kindergarten, looking at that equivalency of counting and cardinality. And then under that, for K through third grade, operations, algebraic thinking, numbers and operations in base 10. So, and you can see those are cross-cutting themes across through K through third grade. And then algebra and functions for the learning foundations, which is focusing on classification and patterning, some various subdomains in that area, but across all of the learning foundations, as well as the K3 content standards, we have measurement and data and geometry. So I hope this shows you visually how these align. We will be submitting a more extensive document with the domain areas and subdomain areas and how those relate to one another. That will be on our Credential website there. But in this presentation, once you download this from the CTC PK through 3 ECE Credential webpage, then these links are live so that you can go right into those documents and use them effectively. Next slide, please. So we have an opportunity to build on pedagogy and practice from concrete developmental concepts to more abstract mathematical thinking. We know that children learn in basic concrete ways initially in their development. They begin their mathematical journey from the time that they're born. Math is embedded into life. And so that's where we want to build on that. And we want to realize that children come to us with a skill set in mathematics already when they enter preschool and continue on their educational journey through the grades. So we encourage programs to prepare candidates by building that strong foundation in math skills and specific ways of thinking about math through wonder and discovery, and where children are engaged and they're interested in those inquiry-based learning opportunities, and understanding that it's the interaction of math concepts into everyday life that gets them excited about their journey in math. So we want to build on that foundation, and as they go through pre-K through third grade, we don't want to limit that. We don't want, in a sense, to shut that down. We want that to continue forward. We also want to recognize that pedagogy and practice in the early years does create the foundation for building on critical thinking skills and competence in relationship to math skill building and each successive grade as they go through their educational journey. And as I mentioned, math is a part of our lives from birth. It is the natural ways in which children develop their thinking skills, understanding concrete objects, pictures, actions, and symbols in their environment. And it gives them meaning to those things that they visually see and work with and manipulate on a regular basis throughout their day. We want to recognize that math is the means and foundation to the solid development of the skills of learning, logical thinking, and reasoning that are necessary for STEM education. That includes science, technology, engineering, and math practices. Next slide, please. So when we look at unpacking the program math standard, there are basically 5 areas that the program standard focuses on. One of the critical areas, is to help institutions and programs understand that learning needs to be facilitated in the areas of these 5 listed that were those 5 main areas that, again, were listed with the learning foundations: number and operations, including counting and cardinality, mathematical thinking and understanding relationships, algebra and functions, measurement and data analysis, and geometry. So this particular slide and the slides that follow really gives you a visual example of how you can take those 5 cross-cutting themes within the program standard and look at the learning foundations and content standards and be able to pull the substrands from those that relate to these main content areas within the program standard. So this example focuses on measurement and data analysis. And in TK, I'm not going to read each one of these, but TK, you're going to look at objects by length, weight, or capacity. directly or indirectly by putting objects to the side. Kindergarten, you're going to describe several measurable attributes of a single object. First grade, to order these objects by length, compare to lengths of two objects indirectly by using a third object. And then second grade, measuring the lengths of an object twice, and then using these units to describe how the measurements relate to the sides of the unit chosen. And then third grade, generate measurement data by measuring lengths or ruler markers with halves and fourths of an inch. So you see progressively how it gets more complex in the children's understanding of each one of these 5 areas. Next slide, please. So one of the other content areas of the program standard is to draw and extend children's emerging mathematical knowledge, understandings, and capabilities at their current developmental level, while providing the support needed to sustain their progress. So again, we believe that children come with a depth of knowledge and understanding about math in general. And so we want to build on that capacity. And so you'll see examples before you from TK, kinder, first grade, second grade, and third grade of those objects that are familiar to them, maybe in their home environment, classroom environment, and then utilizing those objects to dive a little bit deeper into about the actual shapes to the actual units or parts of the whole. So again, those domains and subdomains are able to kind of help you understand a little bit about how this could progress over the grade levels. Next slide, please. And then we look at building conceptual understanding of math in children's experience and everyday life by using tools and strategies to solve problems with that increasing complex mathematical understanding and skills. So again, taking them from where they're at, understanding how to use various objects to understand math concepts, and then how to solve problems in their individual life. And this particular example is looking at the calendar and days of the week and matching numbers of the days of the week, counting strategies, how many days are in the week and how many weeks are in the month, et cetera. And then through the grades could be used for relating those numbers to days of the year, et cetera, to solve problems and to plan ahead. That's great for calendar planning, but yet those are foundational math components. Next slide, please. And then we have observe, listen, and reflect on children's mathematical thinking and discourse by asking questions and helping them to figure out different ways to solve problems, to explain or show how they arrived at their solutions to the problem consistent with the standards and frameworks. This is where it gets rather exciting, where they can look at different shapes, a variety of objects in their classroom to be able to share with their friends, to be able to work together in groups, to build shapes from those basic, to build a picture from those basic shapes, and then understanding how to decompose those shapes into more specific units and how those units can actually be put together to look at the total number of objects and describe each one of those parts. So that's, again, another example of how to impact that component of the math standard. Next slide, please. And then we have using multiple modes of communication about mathematics, including language, gestures, movement, a use of variety of tools, writing, art, and other modalities that allow children to express their mathematical development in meaningful and comprehensible ways. And so we can pull in other domains such as art, literacy, science, some great larger domains of learning to help them understand a little bit more about these mathematical concepts and dimensional learning, and using art as a medium to express that, as well as actual physical objects I believe there's an example in third grade of using a styrofoam object to be able to cut into parts, etc. So these are, again, an example of how to utilize the various modalities of learning to promote math learning and concepts. Next slide, please. I love this quote by Piaget. It says, every student is capable of good mathematical reasoning if attention and care is directed to activities of his or her interests, and if by this method, the emotional inhibitions that too often give him a feeling of inferiority in lessons in mathematics are removed. So if we make math exciting, engaging, a part of their everyday life, then children will continue to be interested in math learning and will be able to develop the skills necessary for cognitive development and their future learning in mathematical skills and efforts. So I'm going to hand it over to Tim.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. All right, so what I'm going to be talking about is a mapping that we created between the mathematics standards and the elements within the TPE, primarily within domain 8, but also cover the elements from TPE 1, 2, and 3. And so the main thing we want to talk about is how the candidate competencies that are addressed in each of the standards are aligned with some elements of the TPEs, and they're not just within the domain 8 for mathematics, but they also fall into the others. And another thing we like to point out is that when you're beginning to develop the coursework and the clinical practice for your proposed programs, is that we'd like to be able to have the programs demonstrate how they are developing these candidate competencies with direct evidence either from the coursework or the guidelines for clinical practice. And before we move into the mapping, I also just want to thank Dr. Deborah Stipek for her help and support with creating this document. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just run through the first 2 paragraphs of the standard, and just for clarity, the headings and the identifiers, such as like 8.1, teaching aligned with state standards, are not actually a part of the approved standard, but it's just something we created to help facilitate this discussion. But when you look at the actual handbook, those headers won't be there, but just don't be confused. This is just us breaking down the standard as a way to sort of look at it by topical area. So everywhere in the standard where we're going to see candidates are being prepared, we're going to look at that as like a coursework competency. And where we see the program will be performing certain things, we're looking at it as a program requirement. So if we look at the bolded words here, we're going to see that the program's coursework and supervised field experiences prepare teaching mathematics that is aligned with the state board adopted K-3 standards, the framework, the preschool learning foundations and curriculum. And then if we go to where we're looking at the candidate competencies about preparing teachers, we're looking at the bolded words of engaging in mathematics, teaching and learning in a mutually respectful manner with students. So where we're seeing alignment with those keywords and the TPEs are, first of all, in TP3 3.2, which is part of the domain around instruction, is around providing subject-specific pedagogy in accordance with state frameworks. And when we're looking at also the elements of TPE domain 8, we're looking at 8.1 and 8.4, which is around planning and implementing mathematics instruction that is again grounded in the California standards and frameworks and the preschool learning foundation and curriculum framework. And we also know that the California mathematics framework will be getting revised, and we're expecting a new version to come out probably sometime by the middle or end of this year, but we're still referring to it as the California framework, mathematics framework. And then you may see a small revision in some of these, especially with the candidate competencies around engaging students in mutually respectful manners and developing positive relationships, because a lot of those TP elements are addressed in domain 2, which is around effective learning environments. So in the final version of this mapping, you may see some elements from domain 2 with regards to teacher-student relationships. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And then this is just the second paragraph, which we are labeling as building on students' prior knowledge. And in here, we're looking at candidate competencies around building on children's developmental mathematical capabilities, and then using their knowledge of individual students to meet them where they are developmentally and providing appropriate supports. And in this case, we're seeing alignment with elements from domain 3, which is around providing developmentally appropriate mathematics-focused learning opportunities, making appropriate instructional adaptations, and then providing, let me turn this off, activities and lessons that build on what students know, which is part of meeting them where they're at. And then also applying information about children's current learning levels. And this one actually covers probably one of the largest number of elements across the TPE domains. So if you could go to the next slide, please. We're going to continue with the remainder. And then within the domain 8, we're looking at planning and implementing mathematics instruction that's appropriate for children's developmental levels, and then also differentiating and providing developmentally appropriate instruction and tasks to meet individual children's learning needs. And those are all going to be aligned with this part of the standard, which we are labeling as building on students' prior knowledge. And let's go through one more, and then I'll just kind of skim through the remaining 3 and move on to Erin, which is going to be talking about IPR program submission. And then in the third paragraph, we're labeling this building conceptual understanding and foundational mathematics skills. And here we're seeing definitely some alignment from domain 1, which is around engaging students. And that's going to be connecting to real life context, adjusting instruction as needed. And then under domain 8, differentiating, providing developmentally appropriate instruction, and also supporting respectful child-to-child interactions. And then while we do understand that in many programs, the sort of positive relationships, respectful interactions may be like an overarching theme or part of the philosophy of the program, we're really going to be looking for evidence of this in not only in the coursework, but also in the clinical practice guidance documents, so that it's not just something that's part of the overarching like research-based or theoretical view of the program, but it's where we're actually seeing that candidates are being prepared to develop these competencies. Okay, feel free to take, that's like I got about 7 more, all right, I can slow down. I didn't expect to go through all these. I was only going to go through the first 2 or 3.
Tim, I was so worried we wouldn't have enough time. And as I'm clocking, I'm like, I think we're okay on time. So sorry to just send that message wise to you, but
no problem.
I just know we're good.
I just thought maybe after 3 cups of coffee, I was going a little too fast.
No, this is perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And so we can get to go through all this. So the next one we're looking at is going to be paragraph 4, which we're labeling as building on children's mathematical thinking and problem solving. And then we're talking about candidates learning to providing activities and opportunities for students to figure out their own ways to solve problems. Emphasize the importance of observing, listening, and reflecting on children's mathematical thinking, and providing a variety of tools to further surface and build on children's mathematical thinking, and also asking questions to elicit children's thinking and problem-solving processes. And here we're seeing alignment going back to domain 1 about promoting children's thinking and engaging in problem solving. And that's around the engaging students. And then in domain 3, we're looking at providing developmentally appropriate mathematical focused learning opportunities, as well as play activities. And one thing that we definitely like to emphasize is that play is a very important for development with students in the PK3 grade range. And then also have activities that require mathematical reasoning that's appropriate for children at that grade level. And then also aligned with the observing, listening, and reflecting is element 6.8, which is about observe, interpret children's strategies in solving problems and ask thought-provoking questions. All right. Next slide, please. Okay, and this one actually is one of the larger paragraphs here. This is about teaching all the PK critical mathematics strands. So here we're looking at the 5 strands that are listed as number operations, including counting and cardinality, mathematical thinking and understanding relationships, algebra and functions, measurement and data analysis, and geometry. And one of the things I'd like to point out is that unlike, I guess it would be the handbook, for our standard, we're breaking out measurement and geometry as two separate strands, whereas the handbook actually, I believe, has those together as two. And then we also want to help students develop increasingly complex mathematical understanding and skills consistent with the progression of the mathematics strands identified in the standards, the framework, and the foundation. And here we're seeing alignment between elements in domain 3 and of course in domain 8. So about using subject-specific pedagogy in accordance with the state frameworks. And again, that's aligning with the frameworks and the foundation. And then providing opportunities consistent with universal design for learning principles for children developing knowledge related to, and those are the 5 strands that we just listed. And I think I might be ending early. There should be one more. And then here under promoting children and candidates' use of multiple modes of communication, we also want to emphasize that this is not just about promoting these modes of communication within the children, but also promoting these modes of communication within the candidate. So we're considering the candidate using these modes of operation as one of the candidate competencies that the program should be addressing directly through coursework and clinical practice. And then through these clinical practices, candidates learn that deep mathematical thinking and learning occurs and is supported through promoting multiple modes of communication. And then we also want to emphasize the fact that this is done to help support the development of children that are English language learners and disabilities, and helping them improve the opportunities to learn mathematical development. And so going back to domain 1, which is around engaging students, so where children are engaged in effective expression. Domain 3 around curriculum, so promote core curriculum knowledge in all children, including mono and multilingual children, children with disabilities, and children with other learning needs by providing explicit instruction of vocabulary and academic language. And then going back to domain 8 for mathematics, we're talking about supporting all children to develop academic language of mathematics, and also to encourage parents and guardians to use home language to talk to children about mathematics. And then in the perspective or the proposed guidelines that we're going to have for program submission, we're also going to be looking at a separate category where we're taking out 2 of the elements or candidate competencies around respectful relationships and positive interaction with children. And we're going to possibly be asking for programs to address directly how those 2 candidate competencies are being developed through either the coursework, clinical practice, or both. And I think that would be the last paragraph. And then I would like to turn this over to Erin, who will talk more to you about the IPR process and how programs would submit their proposals. So, Erin.
Thank you, Tim. All right, that's a lot of content, everyone. We've walked through the standards a little bit. I really, really love this sort of unpacking of the standard language, calling out the candidate competence and the TPEs that Tim did, and the really deep dive about early math content that Debbie did before us. So you are thinking about how are you going to respond to this standard as you get ready to propose your new program. So I just have a single slide. I'm not going to go in depth on this. That is because you will notice at the bottom of this slide, we are having a 2-hour webinar tomorrow where we will talk more deeply about what is going to be required in terms of submitting a program proposal to offer this new program, which we know a lot of you are excited to do, and we are really excited to see those program proposals. So we currently can accept program proposals from institutions that are already approved by the commission. So these institutions already offer a selection of educator prep programs and are going to be seeking to now add the PK3 credential offering to candidates in the future. The process for offering a new program is that explicit pieces of evidence will be submitted to us in a very particular way. And again, we will talk about this tomorrow, but we have made a determination here about what evidence we believe will be necessary in order for the reviewers to be able to see that your new PK3 credential is aligned to the standards. So we will be asking for some very specific things around not only the program design language in the standard, but of course, any of the standards that have performance expectations, aka candidate competencies. We ask for some evidence of that. And, you know, of course, we've got some new requests for the new math, the new inclusion, equity, and diversity standard, and the new literacy standard. So we're holding separate webinars for each of those. If you haven't had a chance to attend all of them, we're making this great one-stop shop webpage where all of these webinars and all of these materials will be available to you. So the process will be that when you are ready, you will submit your program proposal, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow, how that looks and what the process is for that. Programs are reviewed by a minimum of 2 individuals. We are hoping to put together, we've been recruiting, so we're going to be putting together teams of individuals that have both multiple subject program knowledge, but also early childhood education program knowledge. And for those of you who know the commission and the kinds of credentials that we've historically offered, we don't have a pool of ECE expertise. So we have been recruiting for individuals. I've got a really nice deep bench now of individuals who have that expertise and are really excited to be part of this review process. So each program will be reviewed, as I said, by a minimum of 2 folks, probably more, because we'd like to be able to let everybody who wants to participate have an opportunity to do that. It is an iterative process, meaning reviewers will look at your submissions, and if they have any questions, if they are unclear about any evidence, if they need to see more evidence or a different piece of evidence, they will provide feedback regarding what it is that they need to see in order to determine alignment. That feedback will be sent back to the institution. You will have an opportunity to respond to it. It will come back to us. We'll go back to those same reviewers, and that can go on for as long as is necessary in order to find alignment to the standards. So you will be able to have as many opportunities as you need, with some guidance, obviously, from commission staff to demonstrate alignment to the program standards. Once the program is determined to be aligned to the standards, it will be taken to this Committee on Accreditation, that's our COA, for approval. Not until the COA gives approval can you begin operating these programs. And an additional caveat right now for this is that we really have been trying to move this as quickly as possible, which means we're opening the program review process a little earlier than we might normally because the regulatory package has still not been approved. We have to have full approval of those regulations before we can take programs to the COA, before you can start operating them. But we don't want to wait for OAL, the Office of Administrative Law. So we're really kind of moving both of these things down the road at the same time. That regulatory package is ready to go forward, but the reason that we really need to wait is if the Office of Administrative Law needs us to change anything in that regulatory package that could affect program requirements, we don't want to have given you permission to run and operate and then potentially have you have to pull something back. So we do need to wait for those regulations to be passed. Again, please come tomorrow. I know this has been really brief. Please come tomorrow if you can to that IPR webinar. Even if you're not intending to submit a proposal, in the next month, maybe you're not intending to submit until next spring or even next fall. If you can come tomorrow, I think it will be a really good opportunity to just sort of wet your whistle, get thinking about what it is that we're going to ask for and how that might look. And if you are at an institution, if you are coming from your institution's child development department or early childhood education department, and this is really new to you, please be working with the School of Ed at your institution, because there is a hierarchy we like to call the unit head, which is usually the School of Ed, not always at an institution. Then they have sort of ultimate oversight and support for all of the various educator prep programs that need to be offered at that institution. And they've got a lot of experience. So hopefully if you are, again, over in the early childhood department, or you're in the child development department, you're working closely with your colleagues in the School of Ed. They have a lot of experience submitting program proposals and should really be helping you with this. So hopefully you're not trying to do this all on your own and for the very first time, because there's a lot. It's a process. And with that, I will turn it over to Renee to wrap things up.
Actually, Erin, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to hand it back to you for just a second. You had a question in the chat asking if there's an application process to be part of the review group. Would you mind explaining that just a little deeper? So
Yeah, if you would like to be a
interested?
reviewer, thank you for that question. Please send me an email. I've been the one doing the recruitment right now, and I'm keeping a spreadsheet. And if we've got a review session scheduled coming up, if you can't make that, that's okay. I've got notations for folks who want to be part of the process in the future as we have future sessions. So send me an email. Rosemary can put my email in the chat, but it's esullivan@ctc.ca.gov. So please email me if you're interested, whether you have ECE or multiple subject experience, because we need both. And there's going to be quite a few new programs, and we don't want to have to tap the same, 5 people 25 times. So really want a lot of names so that we can spread the experience around to all the reviewers. Thank you so much, Renee.
It's the R name. I'll take it though. Rosemary and I have known each other a good amount of time, so it's a compliment to be called Rosemary by all means. Well, we want to make sure to share with everybody what is on this page and what these links are, so that way everybody knows. At the top here, we have the website that we are talking about, and this is the PK3 ECE Specialist Instruction Credential page. And this is like, if you're going to go to any document or any site to find out about PK3, you absolutely want to be going to this site. Annie, I see right in the chat that you just said, can you repeat this in the webinar tomorrow too? Absolutely. We have actually this exact slide in the deck for later today. And then we have a different version of the resources in our slide deck tomorrow. So we are trying to consistently make sure that we're sharing this. Also, if you're ever having one of those days where you're going to you dive into the rabbit hole, maybe you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't get back to sleep. Maybe it's the middle of the day and you need to take a break and step away from the computer. Sorry, this is going to date me here, but the PK3 handbook is fantastic. It is a stellar resource for everything related to PK3. And I did say step away from the computer because I printed the handbook. And anytime I'm going to face-to-face meetings right now, I'm bringing actual hard copies. A lot of people like to work in the virtual space, but for some of us, it's healthy to just have a hard copy every once in a while so you can pull away from the computer and really dive deep into that document. And so if you haven't had a chance to check out the PK3 handbook, I just ask you to please take time to dive in there when you do have a couple minutes, because it is definitely worthwhile. It will be a reference guide, and it hopefully will be very helpful to people. Also, if you have not subscribed to the ECE news or the PSD news, please do so. Both of those links, you'll be able to subscribe directly to those two listservs and those two means of communication. We try every week to get out we do get out the PSD news every single week. It comes out Friday afternoons. Be out on the lookout. It's usually afternoon. Technically, I think for me, I always look around 3 o'clock. It's kind of like a way I kind of like to end my week. I look through all the different items that have come up. I check and see if there's anything I need to add to my calendar, if there's any upcoming webinars I need to register for, or opportunities to be involved in the Cal FTPA field test, or just anything that's going on at the commission, you're going to find in the PSD news. Anything related to early childhood education, you're going to find in the ECE news. So please make sure to subscribe. We also have the forum for any questions that people have. We encourage you to ask questions. We will try our best to answer them and get them on the FAQ, which is listed on the ECE PK3 Specialist Instruction Credential page. We also encourage you, send us an email at any time. We are checking that ECE mailbox multiple times a day, and we try to respond as quickly as possible. And even if it's a situation where you're not sure exactly if it should come to the ECE mailbox, don't worry. Debbie, the team, we're going to make sure that we get it to exactly who it needs to be at the commission. Maybe that's certification, whoever your thought needs to go to and be correctly answered by, we will make sure we get it there. We also would like to encourage everyone to come and join us at ECE office hours. That is a chance to just pop in if you have any questions, if you have concerns, if you have something that you want to share. Maybe you've seen something in the field that you think is outstanding and you want to bring it to our attention. So that way we can share it with others across the state. Please, please join us at the ECE office hours. It's during your lunch. It's meant to be casual. If you're eating food, don't worry, show up. We want to be there with you. And we want to answer any questions you have and just be a direct source of communication. Also, I am so excited about the upcoming Early Childhood Education Community Circle. Join us on Monday. It's also going to be kind of during lunchtime. It's 11 to 12:30. Pop in whenever you'd like. This is just the intention is it's an open space to talk and have communication and discussion. Please know that one of the things that Debbie and I are also hoping is that topics will surface during Community Circle that we can then bring back to a future Community Circle. And if there's any gaps or there's any places where we need training or experts, or we want to try to help fill those gaps, and we're hoping Community Circle can be that vehicle. Before we wrap for the day, though, and go to the webinars that are coming up, I do just want to give a couple shout outs to the team that put this together. We've been working on this webinar since November. That's when we first started planning it. I want to give a huge shout out to both Rosemary and Tim, because many people, myself included, took a break and stopped during the winter holiday and spent some time with family and stepped away from work. I had the opportunity to visit some family in Alaska for about a week, and it was wonderful. It had been 6 years since we had seen them face to face in Alaska. During that week, Tim, Rosemary, Deborah Stipek, they were meeting with Deborah to get the information needed. Tim was working for hours putting together those fantastic documents that he shared with everybody, those crosswalks. So it was really exciting in the chat to hear people say, thank you so much for this. And thank you for this effort, because it has literally been months in the making. And so a lot goes into putting these webinars together. And we really appreciate everybody staying on too. We literally have almost the same exact group from the start of the webinar to the end, which is fantastic. Creating that community is something that we're hoping that we can contribute to. We also want to thank everybody for being here today. We want to thank you for your expertise, for all that you contribute to helping to train California's teachers. And most importantly, training the teachers, but it's also about the children and the families that we get the opportunity to engage with. So thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you for sharing with us when things are working and when there's gaps, because we're going to work on this together. We'll be doing it for a while, and we just encourage opportunities for us to be in communication. So with that, we'd like to invite you we have some prior webinars. There was one in January on unpacking the PK3 literacy standards. And then this one that's happening right now, those will be up and posted, or excuse me, the literacy one is already posted on the PK3 website. And then as soon as we have a chance, we will get this math webinar posted with the resources that we shared, including the slide deck. Want to also mention to everybody, hopefully we'll see some of you later on today. We have the Unpacking the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity webinar happening later this afternoon from 1 to 2 p.m. I'm curious. I can't wait to see how many people come from the one webinar to the other. I'm excited for that. And then tomorrow, please be here if your schedule allows. We have the PK3 program proposal process, which is happening tomorrow from 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. Okay. Oh, thank you so much, Nicole. We will check on that right away as soon as we're done with that, and we will get on it. Thank you. And Rosemary's already responded. That's how a team works. Excellent. Okay, let's go ahead to our final slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit on the question form. You're also welcome to email us at the ECE mailbox address. Any way you want to reach out, you can reach out to me directly, renee.marshall@ctc.ca.gov. You can reach out to Dr. Debbie Keeler. She's part of the team as well, or anybody who's on right now. We're happy to help. And then let's go to our last slide now. I love the humanity of presenting in the virtual space, everybody, because that's the reality of this. So thank you so much for starting your Thursday morning with us. We deeply appreciate it.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
How do I register for tomorrow's presentation?
Actually, let me hand it over to Erin, because she's going to be one of the leads on that tomorrow. So
Yeah.
Okay.
You
don't
have to register.
Sorry.
We don't require registration. And the link for the webinar, Rosemary dropped it in the chat. She said it's called Link for Tomorrow's Webinar, and it's from 9 to 11 tomorrow. So if you just copy and paste that link or copy it and put it in your calendar invitation, that's enough, but there's no registration required.
Okay, is the link attached to the CPTP letter that was sent out? That's where I found the link for here and for the one at 1.
Oh, I don't know. We didn't send the letters out. We usually post it in, we post things like this in our e-news.
Okay.
So if you get the PSD e-news, it's definitely posted in last week's e-news. But again, the link, Rosemary dropped in a second time. Just grab that and save it somewhere, put it in your calendar, and that link will get you in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Guadalupe, for unmuting and asking. We appreciate it, because that's what it's about is, you know, if you got a question, let's try to answer it when we can. So appreciate it. Thank you also for all the people who are commenting in chat. It's so nice to be able to see that communication and to just get the feedback. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. We hope you have a wonderful couple hours and that we see you later on this afternoon. But if not, we'll get everything recorded and up on the site as soon as possible. Please reach out to us. We are here for you, and we are so grateful to get the opportunity to work with you, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day, and hopefully we'll see you this afternoon, everyone. Take care.